the insider trading before the attacks, but that's okay because destroying the records of the largest investigation in SEC history is just part of routine record keeping. NIST has classified the data that they used for their model of WTC7's collapse, but that's okay because knowing how they made their model of the collapse would jeopardize public safety. The FBI has argued that all material related to their investigation of 9/11 should be kept secret from the public, but that's okay because the FBI probably has nothing to hide. This man never existed, nor is anything he had to say worthy of your attention, and if you say otherwise, you are a paranoid conspiracy theorist and deserve to be shunned by all of humanity. Likewise him, and her, and her, and her, and him. Osama bin Laden lived in a cave fortress in the hills of Afghanistan, but somehow got away. Then he was hiding out in Tora Bora, but somehow got away. Then he lived in Abbottabad for years, taunting the most comprehensive intelligence dragnet employing the most sophisticated technology in the history of the world for a decade, releasing video after video with complete impunity and getting younger and younger as he did so, before finally being found in a daring SEAL team raid which wasn't recorded on video, in which he didn't resist or use his wife as a human shield, and in which these crack special forces operatives panicked and killed this unarmed man, supposedly the best source of intelligence about those dastardly terrorists on the entire planet. Then they dumped his body in the ocean before telling anyone about it. Then a couple dozen of that team's members died in a helicopter crash in Afghanistan. This is the story of 9/11, brought to you by the media which told you the hard truths about...
His head could be seen to move violently forward.
And...
They took the babies out of incubators.
And...
Mobile production facilities.
And...
The rescue of Jessica Lynch.
If you have any questions about this story, you are a batshit, paranoid, tinfoil, dog-abusing baby hater and will be reviled by everyone. If you love your country and or freedom, happiness, rainbows, rock and roll, puppy dogs, apple pie, and your grandma, you will never ever express doubts about any part of this story to anyone. Ever.
Well, I didn't.
This has been a public service announcement by the Friends of the F...
Okay. So...
Wow.
I would have told you to shut up 20 years ago.
So I know the guy who put that together is James Corbett, and he got kicked off YouTube.
For this?
I don't know. I'm sure it didn't help. I don't know what they used to kick him off, but they did.
They showed Richard Gage on there. That's that dude from Grand Theft World.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So he has a lot more of those kind of videos about 9/11. He has one about the Oklahoma City bombing. That so many things don't add up and make sense. But again, you're not allowed to ask these questions.
I would have brushed it all aside had it not been for the same goddamn play. You know, if they at the very least didn't try to use domino theory every year of my life as long as I've been alive, the thing that didn't work back before I was born, we're going to keep doing
for
this.
Vietnam, yeah.
I would never notice it. It's just like even a dullard can see a pattern. I guess you'd think.
So I really appreciate you coming on. Is there anything else? I mean... So we're not denying that there was a horrible event that happened on 9/11 or that those buildings fell down and thousands of people were killed. We're not denying any of it. We're saying that, you know, who's really responsible, who's the culpable, how did it actually happen? Because Building 7 didn't come down the way they said it did. And I mean, if you just look at it from a engineering viewpoint, it didn't happen. There's no reason why the penthouse would come down first. That doesn't make sense. And again, before or said, even Rosie O'Donnell, I have a video of Rosie O'Donnell questioning this on The View from like 15 years ago.
Before she got her mind right.
Before she got her mind right.
She's a much happier person now. I don't know if you've seen her clips.
So go ahead, Doctor.
I was going to say, I think there's a couple other videos that I put on here, and one of them shows it collapsing at falling over as a progressive collapse. I thought we probably ought to share a little bit about that.
Okay.
If that's okay with you.
Yeah, go to Steph and let me bring that back up. Go take the camera to Steph.
All right, camera on Steph. Here we go. There's my magic light. All right, so let's go here. Let me see.
Sorry.
No problem.
No worries.
Yeah.
No worries.
I think it's this one. You can come to me now.
All right.
I think it is too.
Back to Jimmy.
So let's watch this. I think this is. And now you're saying this is how it should have fell down.
I'm saying if you use what NIST says happened.
And I had the NIST.
Yeah. This is what would have happened.
Okay.
I didn't say that in my report, but the fact of the matter is, if a column over here on the edge of the building, like column 79, comes out and those around it comes out first, then they lose support. but the others are still there. So why is it going to stand straight up and come down its own footprint? It's not going to happen that way.
So if it happened the way they said it, this is how it would go. Look, okay, let's
More
watch.
like it, yes.
So this is how it would look.
And if you begin to see the top of it, this is not a rectangular building.
Right.
This is, and so the stiffness of it is not in like a rectangle. There's parts of it that are heavier than others and all that kind of stuff that's going on. The stiffest part of this building is at the elevator shafts in the middle of it, the building. NIST argues the portion of the building to your right, if you're looking into it, is the exterior. And they said that that's really, really stiff and everything pushed from there. Not true. Actually, it's less stiff than the centroid of the building where the elevator shafts are.
So you're saying when you see the building fall like this into itself, they're saying that's because the edges of the building were the stiffest. You're saying that's not true, that the core of the building was the stiffest where the elevator shafts were.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the first thing we looked at. We said, okay, where's the centroid of this building? Where is the what I would call the thermal centroid of the building? In other words, if you heat something up, just imagine if you take a piece of steel and you have it and you hold it on one end and you heat it up, it's going to move away from that where you're holding it because it's stiffer there.
Right.
You hold it on the other end now and set it on fire, and it's going to go the other way because that's the stiffest point. Anywhere else in between, wherever you're holding it, that's the stiffest point. The stiffest point for the heating up the floor system was close to that thermal centroid, which was near the elevator shaft.
And so,
go ahead.
And so I just want to ask you, but you know, your colleagues, I mean, you're a well-respected, you were the head of the department, you had a great reputation. What has been the fallout of you doing this study and proving that this could not have happened the way the NIST said it happened?
Well, I guess we'll have to find out, won't we?
I mean, you've done this study, right? I mean, it's been out for a while.
Yeah.
What year did you release this study?
Well, I think it was 2000 and I think it was in 2020, something like that.
Okay.
You know, but anyway, it doesn't mean that I don't know. I know that the vice president is well aware of what I did.
You mean Dick Cheney?
Yes.
Well, that's all good.
That's that. that guy's pretty evil. He's got a lot of connections. And so, do you fear that someone will try to do something to you? Like who knows? Maybe an IRS investigation or something. What do you think would happen?
I don't know. You know, I believe in. I'm a Christian, and I believe in God. And if I'm going to do the best I can for the people of this country, and if I have to suffer for it, that so be it.
And so you're doing this as a service. Obviously, this isn't a money maker for you. This is a career ender for people.
No, I'm doing it. I'm doing it because I feel like the people deserve better.
Okay. And I guess I'm going to find out what's going to happen to me. So we'll see.
We probably won't be another Bohemian invitation.
Well, I have friends all over the world, so
okay.
You know, at the end of the day, it's I don't go out and try to create issues every day, but when I see an opportunity like this, I'm going to at least present what I think is the truth, and let the other situation be addressed.
So that local television station covered it. Did you get invitations to go on other local TV shows, or any other news organizations ever invite you on to talk about it? 60 Minutes, Nightline,
No.
Anybody?
No.
Interesting. Very interesting.
But I did get invitations from engineering that was in Alaska. I got invitation for doing it in Arizona.
Like an engineering conference?
Yeah, yes, or engineering meetings, that kind of stuff, where I shared what I had so that the engineers would have some understanding of where I came from with all of this. And there's an organization in the UK now that's looking at what we did, and we'll see where that all goes. So anyway, I don't know how to address the question you just gave me about not being invited to televisions and sets and all that. I don't know why. I tend to think that they are not always on the truth side.
Right, of course, because they're owned by the people who want to control the narrative, right? Especially in the United States, there's only 6 major corporations that control every news show, every television show, every radio show, every newspaper. The mass media is owned by 6 companies, and that was engineered by Bill Clinton in the Telecommunications Act of 1996. And so ever since then, all the people who are in media know that they have very few places to go work. And so it became very homogenized, and it became very easy to do all those wars. And so they used 9/11 as a pretext to go into Syria, to go into Libya, to go into Afghanistan for 20 years, to go and by the way, and Libya, and those, as Julian Assange told us, those wars are not to be won. Those wars are meant to be ongoing, because it is a money laundering operation to take money from the Treasury and disperse it through the international security state and the military-industrial complex and the billionaires who own that stuff. So that's what we've been living. I mean, we keep pretending that it's ISIS that are the terrorists, but the United States killed 1 million people in Iraq. Look what we did in Libya. Same thing. And the most successful state in Africa, we turned it into a failed state. Look what we did in Syria. We got in bed with ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Syria to try to, and that was all for a pipeline. And we still occupy a third of Syria. As we wag our finger at Putin for going into the eastern part of Ukraine to stop Ukraine from shelling the Russian ethnics there. He invaded Ukraine not to start a war, but to end one. And we're occupying Syria, which is right. We just built 2 military bases inside someone else's country. And which third of Syria are we occupying? We're occupying the oil part.
Absolutely.
And so this has been never ending. And then General Wesley Clark revealed on Democracy Now! That he went into the Pentagon after 9/11, and they already had a plan to go into Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, Iran, Libya, and I think there was 2 more, Somalia, and I think there's Afghanistan. And so they've done most of those. The last ones are, I think, Lebanon and Iran are the ones that are left on the list. And they're trying to do that right now. They're trying to engineer a war with Iran and Lebanon, and they're trying to do it through the Israel-Palestine conflict. They're saying that Hamas was funded by Iran, and that gives us. And if any proxies of Iran attack U.S. soldiers, that's an attack from Iran. And so this has been. There's a document called the Prospect for a New American Century, and it laid out all this. And they said they needed they needed a Pearl Harbor, so they could use that as a pretext. So what they gave the President of the United States was called the AUMF, which is the Authorization for Use of Military Force. And that means he didn't have to declare a war if he wanted to go into Libya. He didn't have to declare a war to go into Iraq or Syria or Afghanistan. They didn't have to declare a war, get Congress to declare a war. He could do that because under the guise of him fighting, under the president fighting terrorism. So we've done all these wars without an official declaration of war. And it's just, we are the world's terrorists. That there's no other country that has done what we've done in the last 20 years or even come close.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate.
And to say the least. And we have over 800 military bases. I say probably 1,000 military bases around the world. No one comes close to that. And a lot of them are secret also. But anyway, I really appreciate your courage, Doctor, and I appreciate you coming on the show, and I appreciate you, sharing your knowledge of engineering and your impeccable reputation and putting it on the line to tell the truth about something like this. And, the idea that you're not allowed to ask questions in the United States of America about anything should be a red flag to everybody. But what they do is they go, "Oh, you're just asking questions. Are one of those?
One of these guys?
What are these guys? You're
just asking
I'm
questions.
just asking questions. What else are you supposed to do? That's what you're supposed
What do you
to
mean
do.
Just
Asking questions? I know.
That's a hostile act.
Yeah.
Let me share something else with you before we go.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be on the air. So one of the things that happened almost at the very beginning.
Well, I just want to let you know we are on the air. We're live.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
So at the very beginning, when the building went down, all three buildings went down. What happened immediately after that? They looked as fast as they could to get all that stuff hauled away.
That's right.
That is not the way you handle anything that collapses. I mean, I've done a lot of building collapse evaluation of failures, and the first thing you do is you put it back together, or you examine what may have created the problem. But if you don't have the material there, and why didn't you have the material there, then you're violating the very issue that you should be using to make a determination of what truly did happen. And yet in the dust particles, they found thermite that was unexploded.
So thermite is an explosive
Oh my gosh.
that they use to implode buildings, correct?
Well, yeah. I mean, it can certainly take the temperature up to about 2,700 degrees F. I mean, it's pretty, or I'm not exactly sure about that number, but it's pretty high. It's to the point that if you look at what happened in the rumble piles, that was not a typical fire.
Right.
So.
Well, I appreciate you. That's exactly. They did the exact opposite of what you're supposed to do, and they also their investigation did the exact opposite of what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to do it out in the open. They did it behind closed doors, in secret, and it wasn't under oath, and it wasn't recorded, and it's just crazy.
Absolutely.
So everything says there's a cover up, and you aren't being told the truth. And the first thing they had to do was make sure that anybody who had a question about it was called a crazy and a truther. A truther. They turned the word truth into that's so Orwellian. They turned the word truth into a negative.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
that's just crazy.
Yeah. All right. Well, we have to move along. I really appreciate you again coming on. Dr. Leroy Hulsey did great work at the University of Alaska Fairbanks and debunking the official story of how Building 7 came down. According to you and your research, and you have impeccable reputation, it didn't come down the way the establishment and the government
didn't realize it was another building for many years.
Right.
I thought two buildings went down for most of that time.
Most people didn't know there was a third building that came down.
Why is it called Building 7 if it's the third one?
Yeah.
Doesn't make sense. Sorry.
Right. Okay, well, thanks again. I appreciate it. And if I remember up in Fairbanks, I'll look you up.
Thanks.
I've been up there twice.
Oh, you have?
Yeah,
awesome.
I did a New Year's Eve gig in Fairbanks. It was, and why was I up there for New Year's? Because I have that good of an agent. And it was 42 below when I was there, 42 below. And the joke I wrote about it, when it has to warm up 70 degrees just to freeze, that's cold. Anyway.
So when you go back, go up there in July.
Okay, yeah, I'll try to do it. All right, doctor, we got to run. We're way behind, but thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, you bet. Take care.
Okay.
Keep me, if you can send me something that we did it or whatever.
Okay, sure. I'll send you a link.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Have a great day. Yep, bye-bye.
All right, Jimmy, we're going to go to a card to bring on Mike McCrae.
Okay.
All right, let's go to a card and we'll be right back with Mike McCrae.
Anybody heard of Pine Gap, Australia? There's this huge listening post out in the middle of, almost exact center of Australia. that's designed to listen to all the communications coming from all the satellites, because it's got a good view of a lot of the southern-facing satellites. So that's Pine Gap, and they write about it down in the Australian papers about how this is our link to the, you know, the spy sky. It basically just enables this thing that, you know, is called Echelon, that a lot of people heard about. A carnivore, you know, is the email version of that. And, you know, it brings us back to our friends, you know, the NSA. And this is a great one. I picked this up off the EFF site. They got a lot of great images there, and it's just kind of funny. We're going to be talking about, anybody heard of room 641A? Whoa! We're going to be talking about that in a minute. But so it's interesting because the EFF has done a lot of research on the NSA and what, you know, what their civil liberties are, and they've even developed these maps that, you know, and it's funny they even call it the octopus, the NSA surveillance octopus, you know, and where all these data transmitters. And look, see, we look right up here, up in the corner there. We got one right up there, right near us, right out of sight of Seattle. It's right here, Yakima, Washington. And so, you know, I couldn't help but just turn the octopus the other way, because that's what it is. You know, it's the NSA octopus. You know, and they basically, they got us. You know, they got all our data, they got all our stuff. And yeah, speaking of AT&T. And so, anybody know who this is? Mark Klein. I'll give you a hint. His name's Mark Klein. And so, once again, he used to be up, you know, at AT&T and that switching center up in the San Francisco Bay Area. That broke the story. On what we see here, room 641A, and it was this mysterious room that nobody could get into except like one person that had super secret security clearance from the NSA, because the only guy that could get in here. And it turned out it was this guy. Mark Klein was the guy who was coming in later to do the maintenance on the system and whatever, and he kept hearing this reference to this room 641A, and I got the name of the processor. There's a certain processor that's in there, like SP3 or something like that. And he kept hearing about all these references. What's this? I need to get in here. What's in here? And so he started investigating, and he turned out to be his own investigative reporter. And so the 641A, nobody knew what was in there. They thought it was like mission control, you know, like the control dome. And so, but it was probably just a bunch of hackers in there, you know. But basically what happened is that he had come across some of these documents at the AT&T facility, and somehow or another he had leaked them out or snuck them out or whatever. And he got it basically, here it is, the SG3 LGX. Yeah. Imagine having that in your basement. And so, and actually here's another better shot of it in color that the EFF had created for us. Thank you, EFF. And so basically it does exactly what Promus wanted to do, you know, 30 years ago, but now, you know, they got a box to do it and just pipes right into the, you know, all your communications go right through this box. Any email you send probably gets sent through this 641A, this SG3.
It's a spy scandal that's already rocked the White House, an intrigue that could threaten the presidency of George Bush. This story centers on incredible allegations of spying on a scale never before imagined. It involves America's Central Intelligence Agency selling computer programs to foreign nations. These programs allegedly allowed the CIA to spy on the intelligence agencies that bought it.
You can turn back now, or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. Here are the facts. In August of 1991, the corpse of journalist Danny Casolaro was found in the tub of Sheraton Hotel's room 517 in Martinsburg, West Virginia. He had 10 to 12 slash wounds on his wrist. Investigators also found a suicide note nearby. Coroners twice ruled the death a suicide. However, Casolaro's family believed there was more to the story. In the time leading up to his death, Danny Casolaro had become increasingly panicked. He told his brother that anonymous callers harassed and threatened him on the phone, which his housekeeper confirmed. Casolaro also told his confidants that if he died, it would not be a suicide. Instead, he implied, it would have something to do with his latest investigation, a massive conspiracy of silence touching on everything from surveillance software to the October surprise, Iran-Contra, and more, bridging generations and reaching all the way to the White House. Danny Casolaro called this conspiracy the Octopus. Here's where it gets crazy. Today, most people have not heard of Danny Casolaro. What was he working on? What happened to him on the night of his death? According to witnesses, he was traveling to Martinsburg to meet with a contact, possibly regarding the now obscure Inslaw case. In the 1970s, an IT company named Inslaw developed a people tracking program called the Prosecutor's Management Information System, or PROMIS, a data mining tracking system easily decades ahead of its time. The deal went sour, and Inslaw eventually took the Department of Justice to court, alleging that the United States did not honor the contract. Inslaw argued that the government pirated this software, sold it to other countries, and tried to bankrupt and silence their company to stop the truth from getting out. Witnesses came forth, including former Mossad Deputy Director Rafai Eitan, who claimed that U.S. and Israeli intelligence agencies cooperated to sell a Trojan horse version of PROMIS to foreign governments. It's possible that Casolaro's investigation began here, but soon he stumbled into what he believed was an international web of espionage, assassination, drugs, illegal weapon trades, and more. He traced the ringleaders to the upper reaches of private security firms, the CIA, and the Reagan-era White House. Today, questions about the events persist and remain unanswered. Theorists have drawn increasingly complicated links between events alleged to be part of the octopus, but how much of this is mere conjecture? It's common knowledge that the world's intelligence agencies have and will murder to keep secrets. But did they murder Danny Casolaro, or did he commit suicide? Numerous people, including former congressmen and other journalists, don't believe the official story. And, more than 20 years later, questions remain. Did someone murder Danny Casolaro?
On the theft of the Inslaw software, which belonged to this couple called the Hamiltons in Washington, who developed this case management software that was just the bee's knees at the time, and the Justice Department showed immediate interest in it, in buying it and then developing it. And they ended up, in effect, stealing it from the Hamiltons and letting it loose all around the world, to the Saudis, to the Israelis, to the Canadians. I mean, you name it, they had it. But with this backdoor feature that allowed U.S. intelligence to be monitoring it. Anyway, so that's just the bare bones of the Inslaw software connection. And there were many investigations, and they drew contrary conclusions as to whether the Justice Department really acted with malfeasance here. But to me, the matter's pretty much settled. And this document alone, which I'm going to read you about Khashoggi. Okay, here we go. This is dated May 16th, 1985. It's addressed to William Weld, U.S. Attorney. It's signed by W. Bradford Reynolds, Assistant Attorney General of the Civil Rights Division. I'm going to first read the document and then comment on it. As agreed, Messrs. Manukur Ghorbanifar, Adnan Khashoggi, and Richard Armitage will broker the transaction of PROMIS software to Sheikh Khalid bin Mahfouz for resale and general distribution as gifts in his region, contingent upon the three conditions we last spoke of. PROMIS must have a soft arrival, no paperwork, customs, or delay. It must be equipped with the special data retrieval unit. As before, you must walk the financial aspects through Credit Suisse International Commercial Bank. If you encounter any problems, contact me directly.
And people should know that Khashoggi is best buddies with none other than Donald Trump.
And this is going on at the time of these Iran arms dealings with the Israelis.
PROMIS software is a revolutionary computer program developed in the 1970s by a former NSA programmer and engineer, Bill Hamilton. In terms of computer programs, it represents the universal translator of Star Trek. PROMIS stands for Prosecutor's Management Information System. It's able to read and integrate any number of different computer programs or databases simultaneously, regardless of language or operating system. According to Bill Hamilton, the inventor, Edwin Meese, Reagan's Attorney General, along with Dr. Earl Bryan and others, stole the amazing software, modified it, installing a trapdoor into that would allow those who knew of it to access the program and other computers, and then sold the software overseas to foreign intelligence agencies. Bill Hamilton knew his software had been stolen when requests for tech support came in from people he hadn't sold it to. The Israeli Mossad, under Rafi Eitan, again modified the software and sold it throughout the Middle East using British publishing magnate Robert Maxwell as a cutout. The revolutionary software allowed almost anyone with the trapdoor code to enter every database in every computer in every language at will, simultaneously. This ability represents perfect information gathering, technology that is undetectable, the ultimate prize of every intelligence agency in the world. The CIA, through GE Aerospace in Herndon, Virginia, GAO contract number 82F624620. The FBI and the NSA modified the back door, but more importantly had enhanced the ultimate program with artificial intelligence, or AI. The program, which came to be called other names such as SMART, had originally been capable of automatically and secretly drawing any information from any computer and all computers connected to the Internet. The contractor that added the artificial intelligence component, GE Aerospace, was purchased by Martin Marietta, which merged with Lockheed Martin, the largest defense and aerospace contractor in the world. Ed Meese was not the only one who recognized the potential promise in Promise. Democrats had their own moves. Jackson Stevens is a presidential kingmaker, a lifelong supporter of George Bush, an Annapolis roommate of Jimmy Carter. The billionaire Stevens' firm, Systematics, later Axicom, had mated the illegal software with banking software. In the late 70s and 80s, Systematics handled roughly 70% of all electronic banking systems in the U.S. Stevens teamed with Wortham Bank, Lippo Group, and BCCI, the Drug Intelligence Bank, to penetrate every banking system in the world. Promise software could be used to influence and predict financial markets worldwide. When Clinton was out of funds during his campaign, it was Jackson Stevens that loaned him $3 million to keep it going. Herbert Pug Winnocour, CEO of DynCorp from 1989 to 1997, is a PhD mathematician from Harvard, where the mathematical breakthroughs using block modeling gave rise to artificial intelligence. In the 60s, Winnocour did research for the DoD on the causes of inner-city unrest in the wake of the 1967 Detroit riots. DynCorp was heavily involved in the evolution of Promise software. Winnocour is a member of the board of the Harvard Endowment, which is not a benevolent university fund, but an aggressive predatory investor with $19 billion in assets invested in a hub-subsidized housing, high-tech defense operations, and George W. Bush's failing oil company, Harken Energy. The Harvard Endowment saw its holdings skyrocket in the last decade, making 33% in 1999. That was the same year HUD announced a manual adjustment to reconcile a $59 billion accounting shortfall between its accounts and the U.S. Treasury account. Geomatics is a company at the heart of the Canadian space program and associated with Lockheed Martin. Geomatics uses remote sensing from space to locate natural resources such as oil, precious minerals, and other commodities. In the commodities market of the world, this kind of perfect information is the ultimate tool to predicting and controlling markets. Remote sensing can closely estimate the size of harvests of agricultural commodities such as coffee or oranges. Perfect information on the size of the orange harvest translates potentially to millions of dollars in the U.S. commodity markets alone. Exploration for oil and gas can be very expensive, but advances in imaging technology, GPS global positioning systems, and remote sensing technologies have advanced light years over the last few decades. This situation is custom-made for enhanced PROMIS software with backdoor technology. What better way to map and inventory the world's resources but by making each nation pay for it? PROMIS software makes it possible to compile a worldwide database on every marketable natural resource. Artificial intelligence enhanced PROMIS-based programs would be the perfect setup to make billions of dollars in profits by manipulating the futures trade in, for example, a rare metal like tungsten, or exploiting a sudden surge in the price of gold and platinum. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police, RCMP, were sold PROMIS software to use in their intelligence gathering operations, and began to suspect that their copies may have been altered, and possibly all of their files were transparent and had been so for some time. The RCMP had been given their version of PROMIS by the Canadian Security and Intelligence Services, CSIS, which was created with the assistance and direction of the CIA. RCMP investigators stated that they and the CSIS had a rivalry similar to the one between the CIA and FBI, and questioned whether any intelligence agency created by the CIA could be completely loyal to its native country. They further stated that they knew that the NSA had compromised their communications equipment. The Canadians put out a report that friendly nations were stealing sensitive technology, particularly related to aerospace, biotechnology, chemicals, communications, information technology, mining and metallurgy, nuclear energy, oil and gas, and the environment. The doctored versions of PROMIS software were acquired from both Robert Maxwell and Dr. Earl Bryan. Bryan is a medical doctor who founded Hadron and had been involved in shady dealings with firms connected with disease research, cytology, and biotechnology. Hadron is at the heart of the U.S. government operations involving biowarfare and vaccines. Ari Ben Menashe is Israel's top spy, who in reports was linked to Iran-Contra scandal and the October surprise. PROMIS software is described in his book, Prophets of War. The inventor of PROMIS software hired Army CID investigator Bill McCoy to investigate the theft, but the famed investigator, who had broken many of the Army's biggest cases, was found dead of a heart attack. Within 48 hours of his death, McCoy's body was cremated, and 2 days later all of his files, furniture, and personal belongings had been removed from his home. His home was then painted and sanitized. The PROMIS saga leads to more than a dozen deaths, many of which share the same pattern. Within 48 hours of death, the body is cremated, residences are sanitized, and all records disappear. From Rupert Murdoch.
In the current market, a good friend of mine helped write a book with another friend of mine, Jim Keith, called The Octopus, The Secret Government and the Death of Danny Casolaro, which is what we're going to talk about here today. And so there's Ken and his little conspiracy zine called Steam Shovel Press. And so we basically, yeah, let's cut to that. Sure. Yeah, and so basically Jim Keith and Ken wrote this synopsis about Danny Casolaro, and they basically wrote this book. So this is Danny. I guess I should dedicate this presentation to Danny's in Danny's memory, because he's no longer with us. He wouldn't have really enjoyed a book like this. I should point out that Jim Keith, who isn't in this photo, but we'll see him later, he also died actually at Burning Man a few years back. And so a lot of people associated with this story have died in one way or another. In fact, there's some researchers say there's up to 40 people who have died under mysterious circumstances associated with this story. And so hopefully we're not one of them. Anyway, so this is Danny. We're going to be talking about him a lot later. And so there's this octopus. Danny was investigating something called the octopus. And the octopus basically had wanted to control everything. All of our basically entire society, our infrastructure, our who we pay our taxes to, what the whole thing's about. And so so this octopus basically came across this piece of software called Promise. From A to Z, for an example, would go out and get everything to the least common denominator, go out and search everything at once, and then come back and sort it all out and figure out what all that stuff was, and then make information out of it. In today's age, that would be like Google or something. Any of this stuff that's out there now, we'll see as the presentation goes on that a lot of the things that happen out here now, especially in terms of Trojans and viruses and things like that, are exactly what Promise was designed to do, because Promise was a data miner. And so we'll see here in a minute, and in fact, let me back up a slide, to this enterprise slide, because today we call it enterprise or the cloud or whatever. And so basically, what it was designed to do was go out, and it didn't matter what system it was on or where it was at, depending on what system it was installed on, it would basically go out and get everything down to its least common denominator, and then bring it all back and sort it all out, and then spit out some information. Unlike any other software at the time, in 1978, 1979. And the company that released the software was called INSLAW, the Institute for Law and something. They're actually still in business, believe it or not, after being almost driven out of business by the government, as we will soon see. And so there's this Promise software. And here's an example of basically what it could look like, because it's out on the market today. And so this is basically an example of something that Promise might do, and it was the first software to let somebody figure out, like, be able to sort by a defendant or attorney involved or whatever. They could sort by all these different things. It's like Excel is today, but today what they had needed mainframes to do before, of course, we can do on a MacBook Pro. But at the time, this was like revolutionary software. Processing where we get everything down to that least common. We're used to that now, but back then that wasn't the case. And so it's very interesting that basically everything we built, everything today that we built on, is all based on this kind of computing power. And so basically Promise wanted to get down to that root level, figure out all the data, and try to make sense of it, and then bring it all back. It's basically almost artificial intelligence at the time. And we'll soon see that they use this kind of software to basically develop almost all the technology that we're used to. Today, we know it as like the social network.
In Crossing the Rubicon, I have one whole chapter on Promise, but Promise, which stands for Prosecutors Management Information System, PROMIS, which was its original name in the early 1980s. Appears in about, I have 32 chapters in the book, and Promise appears in probably 11 of them. Now, what Cynthia was asking and what you were talking about, and to illustrate the case, there's another company that you and I are extremely familiar with called DynCorp.
Oh, gosh, yes.
Which has been very closely connected. I wrote a major expose on Promise in October of 2000 after the National Security Staff of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police came to ask me questions about how their Promise software got compromised. The story's from the Wilderness website. But DynCorp, aside from being everywhere and doing everything possibly dirty, DynCorp also operates the telephone systems for the United States House of Representatives and the United States Senate. The billing records are maintained by an Israeli company called Amdocs, which monitors every phone call called, every phone call placed, every bill, every time, the duration of every call, who made the call, etc., etc., etc. We know that DynCorp has Promise. And this is where I truly wish our dear friend and colleague Catherine Austin Fitz were here today, because I would speak this on her behalf, because she was my teacher on this. What we see is that all these government agencies, as a result of Promise and Promise progeny, promise-enhanced versions with artificial intelligence being in the hand of private corporations has turned the entirety of the United States government into a franchise feeding trough for the benefit of private corporations. The government belongs to private corporations. When you consider that another company known to have promise, aside from DynCorp, is Lockheed Martin, on whose board of directors sat Lynn Cheney, the vice president's wife, until he took office. She was also in the PEOC Presidential Emergency Operations Center with her husband on the morning of 9/11. How did she get in? She didn't hold a government office.
New information on the cold case investigation of a 1981 Rancho Mirage triple murder.
News Channel 3 has learned 3 local Indian tribes are part of the investigation into these murders. News Channel 3's Nathan Baca joins us tonight with a look at what these 3 tribes are suspected of doing. Nathan.
Tamara and John, the 3 tribes under investigation are the Cabazons, the Santa Rosa, and the Torres Martinez. They are suspected of setting up secret experimental weapons testing deals in the 1980s. 3 people who knew too much were murdered execution style in 1981. Riverside County cold case detectives believe the documents you are about to see are what they died for. New documents reveal how local Indian tribes were involved in bringing large caliber weapons testing to the Coachella Valley. Riverside County Sheriff's Department cold case detectives are looking into whether a former Cabazon Indian vice chairman was murdered in 1981 with 2 other people in this home to keep these weapons deals secret. An experimental electromagnetic weapon called a railgun was on the testing list. Documents show a 1980s business partnership between the Cabazon Band of Mission Indians and security contractor Wackenhut to form Cabazon Arms. This is Santa Rosa Mountain, near Highway 74, where the secret weapons testing was meant to take place. Newly uncovered documents show the Santa Rosa Band of Indians was working with the Cabazon Indians. They plan to build the experimental weapons in the mountains south of Pinyon Pines. To find out more about railguns, we talked to UC Riverside physics professor Dr. Harry Tom.
A railgun is a electric-operated gun. It uses only a battery, and you send electricity through the projectile itself, and you make it propel.
This recent video from U.S. Navy weapons testing shows how gunpowder isn't needed to hurl a giant bullet at supersonic speeds. It is the future of artillery, but it's so hard to perfect, it's been tested for 30 years. We asked the Santa Rosa Band of Indians if pursuing weapons testing requiring enormous amounts of electricity and environmental dangers fits in with its promise to protect the natural resources of sovereign tribal land. The tribe has not responded. Additional documents show the Torres Martinez tribe granted Cabazon Arms Company the right to test large-scale weapons on 30,000 acres near the Salton Sea. Torres Martinez tribal leadership have also not responded to our questions. Considering the Indian tribes have moved on with their large casinos, experimental weapons testing deals 28 years ago may not seem to matter anymore. But 3 people were murdered 28 years ago in Rancho Mirage. They left behind family members that search for their killers to this day. Many of the small-scale weapons testing were later used for the Nicaraguan Contra guerrillas that became the focus of the Iran-Contra scandal in the 1980s. Wackenhut Corporation withdrew from doing business locally for a while, but it is back, now winning the contract for jail security in Desert Hot Springs.
Approval of professional services agreement with Wackenhut for jail security services for the police department.
This is quite frankly right up Wackenhut's alley.
Those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
The crimes of decades past are being investigated once again by local detectives, looking into whether 3 people died to bury the secrets, now finally coming to light.
Department of Justice officials were involved in a criminal conspiracy to force Inslaw, a small computer company, out of business.
A top-secret government computer program comes back to haunt the U.S. Tonight, you'll see how that program is now being connected to multiple local murder cases. It's 11 o'clock, time for news.
Now, from the Desert's news leader, KESQ News Channel 3 HD at 11.
Hello, I'm Tamara DeMonte.
And I'm John White. There are new developments tonight in a year-long News Channel 3 investigation. The Riverside County Sheriff's Department is looking into possible connections between a triple murder back in 1981 and a murder-suicide in 2005 that claimed 6 lives.
It's a story you will only see right here on News Channel 3 at 11. The reporter, Nathan Baca.
John Tamara, we have internal documents from the Cold Case Division of the Riverside County Sheriff's Department showing the depth of the investigation. We will not reveal the investigator's identity at this time since the documents show their lives may be in danger. Now we are learning the murders may be a cover-up for one of the federal government's most secret computer programs. Promise is the name of one of the government's most secret computer database programs. Computer programmer Michael Riconosciuto wrote in this affidavit that major modifications to the program were made here in Indio. On July 1st, 1981, Fred Alvarez, his girlfriend Patty Castro, and friend Ralph Boger were shot to death here on Bob Hope Drive in Rancho Mirage. There was a house here that has since been bulldozed. Nobody was ever arrested for the shooting. Family friends say Cabazon Band of Mission Indians Vice Chairman Fred Alvarez was going to blow the whistle on this. Documents from the early 1980s showing a business partnership between defense contractor Wackenhut Services and Cabazon manager John Philip Nichols to form Cabazon Arms. One of their alleged projects was the Promise computer program. Database and pattern recognition software was a new source of information and power in the early 1980s. It starts when the program's designers, Inslaw Corporation, accused the U.S. Justice Department of stealing the software for their own foreign policy purposes. This programmer testified he altered the program to create what's
in the distribution of this software were involved in covert operations, and they were involved in Nicaragua and Central America, and they were involved in operations in the Middle East.
This U.S. Justice Department memo from 1985 shows the Promise software was being sold to Middle Eastern arms dealers and wanted no paperwork or customs inspections to interfere. Even unsolved mysteries got on the case when the last journalist to investigate this spy scandal was found dead in his hotel room. Danny Casolero's wrists were slashed in 1991. It was ruled a suicide, but his reporter notes disappeared, and the book on the conspiracy he was to title Indio was never finished. Congressional hearings were held in 1992.
Describes the committee's investigation into serious allegations that high-level Department of Justice officials were involved in a criminal conspiracy to force Inslaw, a small computer company, out of business.
The hearings ended inconclusively. The Promise software was allegedly altered on tribal land in India with a lack of federal oversight. And just like Microsoft Windows, the database program kept up with the times, upgraded several times over the years. But Promise came back to haunt America in ways never imagined.
A disturbing indication that Robert Hanssen, the FBI man accused of spying for the Russians in what officials said at the time of his arrest was a massive security breach, ended up helping Osama bin Laden. As correspondent Carl Cameron reports, Hanssen sold the Russians an extremely sensitive piece of U.S. technology, and the indications are that they, in turn, sold it to bin Laden's al-Qaeda terrorist network.
From an office in India to foreign capitals all over the world, several murder investigations are connected to this spy scandal. Whether answers can still be found 27 years later remains in the hands of the Sheriff's Cold Case Squad.
She was looking at P-Tech software to implement the next generation of risk management enterprise architecture software at JP Morgan, but became suspicious after she began her own investigation into the company. She uncovered information that indicated that P-Tech was running its software with access to the most sensitive parts of an organization's cyber infrastructure in the basement of the FAA on the morning of 9/11.
Hours after the president and CEO walked out, federal agents went in, raiding this nondescript building in suburban Boston, looking for evidence that could tie the computer consulting firm P-Tech to international terrorism. P-Tech CEO is Osama Ziadi. This is him, 3 years ago in Saudi Arabia. He's pictured with a man named Yassin al-Qadi, a Saudi named by President Bush as a financial backer of Osama bin Laden.
Yassin al-Qadi fits in this category of wealthy Saudi businessmen who believe in and finance radical Islamic extremist groups worldwide.
In an investigation done by CBS station WBZ-TV, 3 sources say al-Qadi is the chief financial backer of P-Tech. Then there's P-Tech board member Yaqub Mirza. He's an officer for a string of Islamic charities which have been a concern to the U.S. government. This becomes all the more alarming when you learn exactly what it is P-Tech does. The company works in enterprise architecture, the blueprinting of an entire computer network. Computer consultant Indira Singh says such a company could gain full access to a client's data.
That could be rather dangerous.
It could be devastatingly dangerous.
Especially when you examine the roster of P-Tech's clients. The company's webpage lists the FBI, the IRS, NATO, the Air Force, the Naval Air Command, the Departments of Energy and Education, the Postal Service, the U.S. House of Representatives. Other sources say P-Tech has done business with the Department of Defense, the Secret Service, even the White House.
And that gives you a tremendous opportunity, if you're so inclined, to examine, manipulate, download all of the most sensitive information of whoever it is you've contracted with.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But tonight, the National Security Agency tells CBS News it is absolutely convinced P-Tech software is safe.
I'm sure that in the end they're going to find that there's nothing of interest here.
But experts like Matthew Levitt look at Yassin El-Khadi and disagree.
For someone like that to be involved in any...
Can attest to is that by noon or 1 o'clock, they told us we had to move from that triage site up to Pace University, a little further away, because Building 7 was going to come down or being brought down.
Did they actually use the word brought down, and who was it that was telling you this?
The fire department. And they did use the word, we're going to have to bring it down. Who's really behind P-Tech is the question. Correct. I asked that of many intelligence people who came to my aid as I was being blacklisted, and I was told, Indira, it is a CIA clandestine op on the level of Iran-Contra. And I have reason to believe this because CARE International, that was mentioned in one of the slides, is a renamed version of Al-Kifa, which was the funding arm for WTC 93. Prior to Al-Kifa, it was called Maktab al-Khidmat, which was the funding arm for the Afghani Mujahideen. It was how the money on the level of Iran-Contra. And I have reason to believe this because CARE International, that was mentioned in one of the slides, is a renamed version of Al-Kifa, which was the funding arm for WTC 93. Prior to Al-Kifa, it was called Maktab al-Khidmat, which was the funding arm for the Afghani Mujahideen. It was how the monies got to Osama bin Laden through the Pakistani ISI. I asked the FBI in Boston, how come MAC was being run out of P-Tech in 9/11? And that jived with a lot of what Intel was telling me, that it's a CIA front, shut up and go away. At that level, I said, well, why doesn't the FBI take advantage of their celebrated differences with the CIA? And I was told, because at that level, they work together.
They are not. That's exactly right. Okay, Nico, we got 2 minutes, so next question.
Is there a connection between this software and the old Inslaw software?
The old Inslaw software is Promise. P-Tech is actually a more sophisticated version. It's a place. P-Tech, in its heart, is software that builds other software with such capability. So it's a more agile, adaptable version of it.
Singh was hired as a consultant for J.P. Morgan Chase to develop the next generation of business architecture enterprise software. The software she was seeking to implement at J.P. Morgan Chase, one of the largest financial institutions in the world, was specialized cutting-edge risk architecture software that would essentially be artificially intelligent and capable of scanning through the millions of transactions taking place across the J.P. Morgan Chase institution in real time, monitoring these transactions for suspicious activity such as rogue trading, and would then be able to alert the proper people within the J.P. Morgan institution to the problem, and potentially even stop the transactions from taking place. The importance, sensitivity, and sophistication of any such software necessarily led Ms. Singh to seek out the true leaders in the enterprise architecture software industry. Her research and due diligence into the issue led her to a company called P-Tech. As the senior risk management consultant for one of the largest financial institutions in the world, Ms. Singh knew to trust credible, proven sources of third-party software. That's why P-TECH's roster of clients immediately put them in the top echelon of software providers. P-TECH's clients included some of the most sensitive organizations and agencies in the United States government, including NATO, the U.S. Armed Forces, Congress, the Department of Energy, the Department of Justice, the FBI, Customs, the FAA, the IRS, the Secret Service, and the White House. This sterling roster of clients made Indira Singh very eager to take a look at P-TECH's software. However, when the P-TECH representatives arrived at the J.P. Morgan Chase offices to display and present their software, Ms. Singh knew there was something wrong right away.
If this is true, did you not report this? P-TECH is a private company, so this relationship would have been privy only to those on the inside. I said, did you report it anywhere that someone who has been placed on the U.S. terror list is key funder, angel investor to a company whose software is utilized at the highest levels of almost every government and military and defense organization in this country, including the Secret Service, the FBI, the Department of Defense, the House of Representatives, the Treasury Department, the IRS, the U.S. Navy, the U.S. Air Force, and last but not least, the Federal Aviation Administration.
Are you saying these were all P-TECH clients?
These were all P-TECH clients, and when I was evaluating them, I was pretty impressed. Why not P-TECH? Exactly. They're being used at the highest levels of all of these organizations. So I was very excited about using them and having their software be able to be at the heart of what I wanted to develop. And I had no reason to believe that if they were in use everywhere at that caliber, that I would have a problem. They're also used in Enron. Perhaps I should have thought twice about that, but they're at use in IBM, of course, and the top accounting firms, and even in the FBI. In MITRE.
What is MITRE?
MITRE is a large company that does specialized technology for defense and intelligence. You would not expect to have an exposure with a company that was so well entrenched and embedded in these kinds of organizations.
What do you mean by the source code?
Well, all software products has some group or organization or person writes code that is then packaged up and, for instance, the word processor on your desk, the spreadsheet, and so on and so forth, the browser, is all written in some sort of code. Those are the keys to it, and if you wanted to improve it, add new functionality, you would change the original code and add new functionality and then repackage it and send it out there. So whoever had access to the source code of P-TECH, that was where the value was. If you lost the source code, you essentially lost the product for all intents and purposes, from a marketing point of view. So only one or two people would have access to the source code. It would be like having the formula for Coca-Cola, basically. It was the perfect day. And yes, you needed inside knowledge. And yes, P-TECH, with all its myriad associations, would have had the inside knowledge. And yes, P-TECH was a CIA front. And yes, P-TECH was protected. So was it an inside job? You don't have to look at this indirectly. This is direct. This requires direct investigation.
Again, that's a stunning interview, jam-packed with incredible information that goes to the very heart of 9/11. And I suggest that people who find this information important and find the controlled corporate media's complete blackout on this information reprehensible do their own part to get this word out by spreading the word about Indira Singh and this breakthrough interview. Remarkably enough, considering the bombshell information provided by this corporate whistleblower, Indira Singh, about this company, which actually operated in the basement of the FAA with complete and total access to every operational detail, including their management of interoperability systems with NORAD that could have directly affected the response of NORAD on 9/11. Absolutely nothing has resulted from the FBI investigation of this company.
Another hit game that was developed was Tetris, which he first licensed from its Soviet creator in 1987. Were there some negotiations with the Soviet government as well on that, or
dealing with the Russians?
You know, this class is Silicon Valley of the U.S. government, so government.
The difference between negotiating the rights for Tetris is not that different than negotiating a nuclear disarmament treaty with them.
And the fight for Tetris's rights began. Whole books have been written on this fight, and all the companies involved in it. The only thing that's ever really certain about this, one of the first times an Eastern product had hit pay dirt in the West, is that Pajitnov himself didn't see a single cent of Tetris's profit until well after the fall of the wall. Microsoft were one of the most vocal companies when it came to securing the rights to Pajitnov's game, in spite of the overtures of Nintendo, who wanted Tetris as one of the launch titles for their new handheld system, the Game Boy. The whole thing was outrageously shady. Microsoft and Maxwell's claim was that they had the rights to Tetris because the American company Spectrum Holobyte, you know, the sister company of Microsoft's that's also under the Maxwell umbrella, had purchased the rights to it from Andromeda. But where did Andromeda get the rights from? Did they even have the right to sell the rights to Tetris? In any case, Microsoft wanted nothing less than exclusivity to Tetris, a piece of every version of the game, and would seemingly do just about anything to secure that. It was even reported that Robert Maxwell himself had stepped in to help broker the deal through his connections. And yes, you may well wonder exactly what that meant. Maybe he sought an audience with Gorbachev himself to try and get the game. Probably not. However, Microsoft were able to sell Tetris for computers using those rights from Andromeda, and naturally did so pretty sharpish, all things considered, resulting in the sale of what is probably their most successful game on various computers through 1987 and 1988. Microsoft's version of Tetris is, as you would probably expect, the one that hams up the Soviet mystique the most. It's right there in the box art and right there in the title, which did more than anything to popularise the classic trope that in order to write in Russian, all you do is write the R's the other way around.
It's in Russian.
You just put the R's the wrong way round.
As for the game itself, well, it's Tetris, basically. The music is pretty cracking throughout actually, which is nice, but the game does default to having these backgrounds in the world that make it incredibly hard to see what's going on.
And his job was he walked both sides of the fence almost, of the road. He was extraordinary. I mean, one day he would be with President Reagan in the White House. The next day he would be in the Kremlin doing a deal which would be in favor of Israel. And I remember what David Kimchi, the former deputy director of Mossad, told me. He said, you know, Robert Maxwell had one philosophy. It was Israel first, last, and always. And never forget that when you write about him. He was, for us, a great patriot. And that was so, but therefore you may wonder, well, why did they have to get rid of him? Well, what happened? Maxwell became more and more in love with himself, I suppose, with his power, his authority, his connections. Nobody he felt could dare challenge him, dare say no to him. He once said, prime ministers come and go, presidents come and go, but I'll be here forever. And so what happened, on that premise, he was approached by Vladimir Khrushchev of the KGB to ask him if he would assist in a plot to overthrow Mikhail Gorbachev, who had taken power in Russia and was bringing democracy, perestroika, into that devastated country. And Maxwell thought, where's the deal for me here? And they said, well, you can handle the national debt if we pull this off. And that would have meant a very good take for him, because he's on 15% of everything he could get on that. So he went to Israel and he said to his friends at Mossad, how about this? Shall we get involved? We should get involved, he kept saying. And he outlined what the plan was. What he hadn't realized, he had totally miscalculated one thing. There were those high up in the Israeli government and in Mossad who were horrified at the idea that anybody would want to remove Gorbachev, because it would immediately bring them into confrontation with the United States. America saw Gorbachev as the only possible hope for salvation in the Soviet Union, which was, a powerful threat. They thought against it still, though in fact it wasn't that powerful a threat, as we were to discover. And the idea of overthrowing Gorbachev and probably assassinating him, with Israel being implicated through Maxwell, or perhaps even worse, implicated through other forces, horrified them, and they thought Maxwell has gone a step too far. At the same time, he was running out of banks. He was borrowing and spending and losing, and his once powerful newspaper empire was beginning to totter, partly due to union troubles. He couldn't stave off huge expenses, never mind the 50 cents that poor reporter but he was running into huge bills, printing difficulties, all the things that we've seen Murdoch deal with and overcome successfully, I think. Maxwell couldn't, and he was losing money.
The evidence is in. So what's the verdict? Although the lack of bruising on Maxwell's body turned out to be a red herring, Dr. Hooper conclusively proved that Maxwell could not have fallen over the side of his yacht. His death was no accident. Everything points against suicide, which leaves murder as the only possible explanation. The tests conducted have shown that it would have been relatively easy for a boat to duck under the Lady Ghislaine's radar and for a team of assassins to board the yacht. Maxwell could then have been subdued, removed, and his dead body later dumped in the sea.
It's kind of really interesting. You know, what happened to us was this. We're sitting around at the Consumer Electronics Show, and typically you have these guys who scurry around looking for interesting games from abroad and try to get the rights and then license them into the U.S. by selling it to a game publisher. And so they showed us this game, and it was Tetris, and I loved it. I said, this is great. And the agent was saying, hey, look, everybody's turned down this game because, you know, Brother Bun turned down the game, EA turned down the game, Sega turned down the game because, you know, it was a stupid game, right? The graphics were awful, nobody dies, you know, bad sound, right? And I kind of go, yeah, but it's really addicting. I really kind of like this game. And I said, I want to make some changes. I need to talk to the programmers. And the agent kind of looks at me, he goes, well, we got a problem here. I go, what's the problem? He goes, well, the programmers are in the Soviet Union. So I turned to my partner, Phil Adams. I said, get the rights. Put it in a red box with a hammer and sickle and get it out in the next 6 months, because I had heard through the rumor mill that there was going to be the very first set of talks between the Soviet Union and the U.S., and it would be between Reagan and Gorbachev. So I said, get the game rights, right? And if this thing actually comes to us, we're going to launch the game during the talks. And that's what we did, right? We launched the game during the talks. We even hired a fake Gorbachev and a fake Ronald Reagan lookalike. And we were running ads in the USA Today that says, you know, because there'll be the headlines, you know, Gorbachev meets with Reagan, and going through all the issues around nuclear proliferation. And then on, you know, the back of the page will be our ad with the fake Reagan and Gorbachev saying what they were really doing during the secret summits instead.
But a very convincing impersonator. This Kim Jong-un lookalike made many tourists look twice in Singapore.
Impersonating Kim Jong-un. Comedian Howard X checked out of his Hanoi hotel on Monday after Vietnamese authorities allegedly revoked his visa.
The visa that I got from my travel agency was invalid. They grabbed the person who issued the visa letter and made us sign a piece of paper saying that it was invalid.
Howard X teamed up with comedian Russell White, a Donald Trump lookalike, for the media stunt.
I think satire is a powerful weapon against any dictatorship, so, you know, they are scared of, you know, a couple of guys that look like the real thing. It's not my fault. It's not our fault for being born like this.
That's what I said to these guys earlier. Like, yeah, this is what I look like.
The two comedians had been questioned by police on Friday after staging a fake summit in the Capitol, drawing crowds and media. According to Howard X, authorities told him not to create any disturbances as the city prepares to host Kim and Trump on Wednesday and Thursday for their second nuclear summit.
They didn't know what the thing was, but they were trying to solve a problem. The problem they were trying to solve was how to get technology companies who historically has never engaged with the federal government to actually provide technologies, particularly in the IT space, that the government can leverage, because they were really afraid of what they called at that time the prospects of a digital Pearl Harbor. But in 1999, because the community got so good at collecting data, but not necessarily that good at processing all the data, that their biggest fear that there was going to be a new attack somewhere in the world, maybe even on the mainland. Like that means there's a revenue source and the stuff was good. If we reject it, then they kind of go, particularly if it's like something like cybersecurity, said, well, we're not making that investment. I mean, I don't know if you guys want to. They go, thank you very much. Here's the next one. And so that's how we got the problem set and how it got to work. And then we would then find a customer in the building that was related to that problem in the first place and pay that customer to take that technology in and use it in an operational way. That's how Palantir got started. I mean, Palantir was this Peter Thiel and Alex basically meeting with me and saying, we got these algorithms on fraudulent transactions. We think there might be some value for the intelligence community. We brainstormed. they came back, and I kind of said, on the black and white, it needs to kind of look like this. The team went away and did a mock-up in 2 weeks, and then immediately we took that team and put them inside the building to work on what we call a CT counter-terrorist problem. And they just learned that business, and that became Palantir, and Palantir is worth somewhere between $10 or $20 billion today.
I am Leila. I work as a content developer. We develop videos, infographics, and motion graphics to combat extremist content.
أنا محمد، أعمل قائدا لفريق التحليل الإعلامي. يقوم نظامنا بمراقبة 100 قناة تلفزيونية عالمية بلغات مختلفة وتحويلها إلى نص وتحليلها لتحديد المحتوى المتطرف. أنا عبد العزيز، أعمل أخصائي.
But the key is, you've got this network of sensors around the world, and then I, sitting at the NSA in Hawaii, come in the morning, I type in my search. I look for, let's say I want to read John Key's email. I enter his email address, and it sends that search to every one of these sensor networks around the world. And they search their local database of metadata and content. The content of all communications that pass through these sites is held for about 3 to 5 days, depending on the storage, and it's constantly going back further and further in time as we gain more capability. So I can see everything. I can see what book you looked at Amazon.com, last week. I can see who you talked to. I can see who your friends on Facebook are. I can see the text messages you sent. I can read the emails you wrote. And I can set up things that are called fingerprints that allow me to track where you've been on the web, who you're talking to, even if you're using sort of anonymizing technology and so forth.
Introducing the Huawei Ascend D-Quad. Stunningly designed and crafted. With a pin-sharp 4.5-inch HD screen. An incredible 8-megapixel BSI camera. Breathtaking Dolby Surround audio. Smart power-saving technology in the most compact body. And a quad-core processor, making it the fastest smartphone in the world. Beauty, power, agility and speed. We call it the Ascend. The Huawei Ascend D-Quad.
Here in Herzliya, just north of the Israeli city of Tel Aviv, and this building is home to an Israeli company called NSO Group, which develops and sells one of the most invasive spywares in the world. The software is called Pegasus, and it doesn't matter whether you're an iOS or Android person, your phone could become a target.
The phone becomes a spy in the pocket. The phone's camera, the microphone, text messages, and anything else done on the phone or close to it are susceptible to monitoring.
This is how Pegasus works. The target receives a text message with a special link. One click on it and the spyware is secretly downloaded to your smartphone. From then on, all your private data, personal messages, passwords, just about everything is being sent back to the operator. So who are the targets? According to NSO Group, its software is designed to track criminals.
Our products have saved the lives of thousands of people, prevented suicide terror attacks, helped convict drug cartel lords, facilitated complex crime investigations, and returned kidnapped children to their parents.
But internet researchers from Citizen Lab embarked on a hunt for Pegasus, and according to them, it does not serve only a good cause. Instead, it may be breaching innocent people's privacies and some countries' laws against cross-border hackers. Citizen Lab tracked the malware in as many as 45 countries, among them 6 states with a history of abusing spyware to target civilian society.
Set the goal for Israel of becoming one of the top 5 cybersecurity powers in the world.
An Israeli surveillance software tool capable of accessing microphones, cameras, and other data.
One Saudi dissident says he spoke to Jamal Khashoggi regularly about Riyadh's use of technology to crack down on critics.
Well, I was working with Jamal in some different projects, and I've learned in maybe the beginning of August that my phone was hacked. So basically, they were listening to every single conversation that we had.
NSO Group, in today's world, based on the evidence we have, they are the worst of the worst. They send you a time-sensitive text message, and it's got a link in it. It's something that you have that human impulse. You see it, you go, oh goodness, I need to check that. Everything in the entire history of your phone, you can immediately copy. Everything that happens on your phone from that day forward, every place you go, everyone you call, everything you read, every photo you take, every audio note that's been on that, or actually because they can turn the microphone on remotely. They can turn the camera on remotely even when you haven't already taken a picture.
Click of a button, you can bring down nations to their knees.
If you made a phone call today or sent an email to a friend, there's a good chance that what you said or wrote was captured and screened by the country's largest intelligence agency. The top-secret global surveillance network is called Echelon, and it's run by the National Security Agency and 4 English-speaking allies, Canada, Great Britain, Australia, and New Zealand. The mission is to eavesdrop on enemies of the state, foreign countries, terrorist groups, and drug cartels. But in the process, Echelon's computers capture virtually every electronic conversation around the world. And as we first reported last February, a lot of people have begun to question just how that information is being used.
We can't see them, but the air around us is filled with invisible electronic signals. Everything from cell phone conversations, to fax transmissions, to ATM transfers. What most people don't realize is that virtually every signal radiated across the electromagnetic spectrum is being collected and analyzed.
How much of the world is covered by them?
The entire world, the whole planet, covers everything. Echelon covers everything that's radiated worldwide at any given instant.
Every square inch is covered?
Every square inch is covered.